Thanks. Yeah, me too.
Your assistants are usually really quick with that, and they always turn out good.
I know. I know. I'm just noticing here that the audience can see the Mardi Gras beads hanging from my
Oh,
doorknob
what have you
over
been
there.
doing this past
Exactly.
weekend since we last saw you?
No, I'm
Still got
not
the
sure.
baseball bat
I have a
there,
feeling.
and
Baseball. But I have a feeling it's still there. I mean, I have a feeling it was there last week. But anyway.
just now realized I have a lamp behind me now.
Oh,
That came out of
yes.
nowhere.
Well, that's
Usually
exciting
it's in
addition
front of me, but
program.
yeah, man, we have so many things to talk about.
All right, let's just go.
Especially talking about inflation. I don't know what the heck that even means, but we'll save that for later. But yeah, let's get into it.
Welcome everyone to Random Assignment. I'm here with the great Corey DeAngelis from the Reason Foundation, who should be screen left as you're looking. Well, for those who are actually looking instead of listening to the podcast. Corey is at DeAngelis Corey. My name is Bob Bowden with Choice Media, brought to you. I was going to hold up the Choice Media app, but then I turned my phone off so it wouldn't ring. Never mind. But nevertheless, brought to you by the Choice Media smartphone app, available right now for the low, low price of free. Thank you for joining us, and please share and like this broadcast as much as you see fit. And Corey, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. The water wasn't working in my condo until like a couple of hours ago, and I'm looking out the window right now, and there's just a ton of water. I don't know where it's coming from, just going down the street, and people are all just like crowding around it right now. So if I'm looking to the side, that might be what I'm looking at. But other than that,
strange times continue in other ways for Corey's neighborhood, apparently.
Yeah, but other than that, I mean, there's been a lot of Twitter commotion going on and a lot of education policy news that we should talk about regarding the police stuff and other incidents.
So let's get right into it. The general madness, as everyone knows, about defunding the police is a term that was, we were told, though it doesn't really mean defund the police.
Yeah, what does it actually mean?
It's kind of an Orwellian newspeak, just because it says defund the police. Like detoxify would mean like remove the toxins from from somebody. Like defund is supposedly, well, we don't mean really defund, we mean partly defund, and so in a way, it's kind of moved the Overton window.
I thought they wanted to stop funding the police. I thought that's what they meant by defund.
Well, some do.
Maybe just a little bit.
I think they learned that's
resources.
Yeah, I think they learned that wasn't the best marketing idea to just have no police at all if someone's breaking into your house. And so it's in a way it kind of moves the window. Like you say, you first say something extremely radical. Let's have no police at all. Yeah, and people say, "Oh my God, that's crazy," and they go, "Oh, we don't mean that. We just mean half of the police will be defunded." And then you go, "Oh, okay, well that's a lot more reasonable." Now that I've started out by hearing something extremely radical,
when you start out with that, police choice sounds really reasonable too, doesn't it?
Right. So we wanted to kind of cover. Of course, this had its education component in defunding police in schools, and there are far too many districts for us to even mention, but we'll just show you a few, starting with Seattle. You see there the school's chief and school board announced intention to suspend partnership with police. Okay, let's get them the heck out. Same if you go look in Chicago, where this was at least an op-ed from the Chicago Sun-Times saying, making the case for keeping cops out of Chicago schools. Just picking another district at random here, Denver, the majority of the school board there, showing support for removing police from schools. And to me, this is almost a form of like a mass amnesia, where we've forgotten that after a bunch of school shootings, the Parkland, Florida one in particular, but other ones too, there was this giant push to like, no, we don't want to arm teachers. We want real police in the schools in case a school shooter shows up in the next school shooting. And so that's all of the, you're reading about all of this wave that was just a few years ago when that was considered the establishment solution. It was the right, reasonable thing. And everyone thought, well, anything else is insane. You've got to put real police inside the schools to avoid arming teachers. And so now it's just as if one cop is a bad cop by all accounts in Minneapolis. And now every school system suddenly realizes the cops are racist. We got to get them out. So,
yeah, I mean, we talked about this last week too, right? When Minneapolis, they ended their contract decades-long contract with the police department over similar issues. And I mean, I get the arguments behind this, right? And I can kind of see the benefits of removing police, some of the benefits of removing police from schools, and that, kids will be less likely to get a criminal record, maybe they're less likely to experience police brutality at schools. And that, happens, doesn't mean it happens all the time. But then on the other side of this, obviously, is what you're saying, right, Bob, that, what if there's a school shooter that comes in, you need someone armed to defend the students? Police officer would be good to do that. Teachers aren't really as
you know what, Corey? There's going to be a school shooter. I hate to sound like I'm calling for that, but I think it's kind of part of life a little bit. I'm not saying it's common. They're kind of like shark attacks. There's a lot more fear over those things than they actually, in a statistical way, impact ordinary people. It's extremely, extremely rare. But there's going to be. I just predict, unfortunately. And so when that happens, what's going to? Yeah, there'll be this mass shift again. Is that what'll happen?
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know what these specific proposals that the three that we brought up today were talking about. I don't know. Was it getting all police out of schools, or were they just talking about defunding them a little bit? All police out of schools. Yeah, I mean, that's the issue, right? That there are benefits of having security at schools. I would argue, I'm more on the side of, if we're going to have security, make it private security. So if the kids get in trouble, make sure they don't get a criminal record attached to them, just for minor offenses. Obviously, if they have a extreme offense, that should be reported to the police officer.
Oh, I see what you're saying, like caught with a joint or something like that. And
I don't know if that should be like a criminal offense, Right. So I think if we have if we allow the principals at the schools to kind of determine what gets reported to the local police station, you can still have people that are armed protecting the students with private security forces. But look, I mean, I don't think there's just one way to do it, or it's not all or nothing here. Maybe some schools are better off partnering with the local police department, some aren't. And we talked a little bit about this last week too, that I think choice really will help solve this problem, because there's no one size fits all problem here. There are unintended consequences either way.
I just wanted to quickly add something, a little bit of a rant on this, but that I see this as this collection of almost polar truth and lie pairs. So the truth is, for example, that there are authority trip cops who get off on being overly harsh, either making stuff up completely or take minuscule things and exaggerate them because they actually just enjoy that. That I've mentioned before. I ran into one cop like this once. Authority tripping cops. That's the truth. The lie is that there's a wave of genocidal white cops killing unarmed black men across the country. The Washington Post's own numbers show that happened 9 times in 2019. There's not a wave of genocide, but I think people are almost kind of being told that in the media. And if we can turn it to schools, the truth in the sense of schools is they should not feel like prisons. And some schools kind of do. And too many people say so for me to believe that has no substance at all. I think schools should not feel like prisons. But the lie is that this one cop ought to make us change all of our school policies, this one Minnesota cop. And so, I sometimes look for, call this my cynical side, but there are people who also profit from these kinds of changes. Let's remember, and I'm not against profit. I'm at least 3/4 as libertarian as Corey. I'm not against profits, but there are groups that then are get hired in place of the cops to do the restorative justice stuff. And they've got these contracts they're staring at, and they love the idea of this shift because they and their companies and their friends could get some big contracts. And to that end, I thought of an old quote from the civil rights leader Booker T. Washington in 1911. And so here it is. Don't get mad at me, folks, for reading this. If you want to get mad at somebody, get mad at Booker T. Washington, because he said it. And what he said was, quote, There's another class of colored people who make a business of keeping the troubles, the wrongs, and the hardships of the Negro race before the public. Having learned that they are able to make a living out of their troubles, they have grown into the settled habit of advertising their wrongs, partly because they want sympathy and partly because it pays. Some of these people do not want the Negro to lose his grievances because they do not want to lose their jobs. And I would just add jobs and power, maybe too, is part of this equation. So be aware this is part of that dynamic, in my opinion. When you call for some of these changes like defunding the police or removing all of the police from a school that is an urban school that could theoretically have some violent problems, just look at who might get contracts to replace them.
Yeah, there's special interests at play here as well, right? And that reminds me of special interests. A lot of people in the discussion about defunding the police have correctly pointed out that a lot of the problems with the policing industry, if you want to call it that, is that there's powerful police unions that protect bad actors from losing their jobs and protect them from having essentially any form of accountability to the people that they're supposed to be protecting and serving. So a lot of people have been talking about how that's an issue. And I think, Bob, you were one of the first people to actually point out that that this
the police union, teacher union comparisons.
Yep, that this is actually that if you believe the argument, and I do as well, if you believe the logic behind police unions harming customers by protecting bad actors from any sort of accountability, you should apply that logic to the teachers unions as well. And as you pointed out, that unions systematically protect the bad apples through contract terms and legal support, and that unions are powerful enough in both systems to intimidate most of the rank and file into silence about the bad apples. So we've seen a lot of instances of misconduct that have been protected with the police union, but also the teachers union. There was a New York Post article just the other day that talked about how there was one teacher that was just essentially placed into a quote unquote rubber room for about 2 decades now. They went away in 1999 to a back room, just kind of shuffling paperwork because they were accused of sexually abusing female students from multiple sources. And they just put him away, and he's on the taxpayer dime, earned about $1.7 million in benefits and salary over the previous 2 decades. So
yeah, people shrug when they. Yeah, you'll find one charter founder who makes some sort of money like that, and you'll see the establishmentarians freak out at, oh my God, look at this corruption. Meanwhile, these rubber room examples have been around for decades, and just people shrug. No one cares. Oh, you hand out tons of money to people that do nothing, and it basically robs the kids in that system of the benefit of that money. Well, whatever. Yeah, so it's the same logic. Some people pushed back on my tweet, for example, where I pointed this out. Don't back into this, Corey. You destroyed it with this tweet. I was joking with Corey before we went live about how my tweet. I was like, I did this June 1st or whatever. Corey comes along on June 7th with his tweet. Yeah, and he does this Muppet thing, and people freak out. Look at that, 34,000 likes on the Muppet tweet.
Viewed almost 2 million times now. I guess people just think in sound bites, man. But this is the idea.
No, it's the perfect. Right? It's the perfect photo. I love it.
The idea here is, look, everybody's screaming, police unions protect bad cops from accountability. And
I'm so jealous that you did that.
You're like, oh, I hope you don't see me. Hope you don't notice me. And what's funny here is some people responded. Most people were like, oh yeah, this is spot on. But there was a couple people that were like, oh, well, give me an example of when a teacher actually killed a student. And it's like, well, I'm sure you can come up with an example of something similar to that happen. I just came up with an example of, sexual abuse, which we shouldn't belittle. And, that's kind of a low bar, right? Like, oh, well, as long as the teachers aren't killing people, then it's all okay. No, the logic is the same here, that if you believe that police unions are harmful to the public, you should also believe that a monopoly on teachers unions or teachers collective bargaining could actually harm students as well by, again, in the same logic, protecting the bad actors from accountability. And before I want to get to the other articles that have made this comparison, I want to bring up Randy Weingarten is the president of the American Federation for Teachers, one of the two national teachers unions in the United States. And she tweeted about, you know, the unions not being accountable in policing. And let's just check out that tweet really quick. I'll bring it up. It's going to cover me up this time. But if you look in the money quote here is the second to the last line. She says, of course, they should tell their side, but it looks like misconduct. She's talking about the cops. And she's saying, and no contract should shield misconduct. To which,
no police. She means no police contract should shield misconduct.
Only police contract.
Yeah.
But yes, if you look at union contracts, they protect bad actors all the time. And so a lot of people replied to this tweet. I want to say since the last time I looked at it, which was like a couple days ago, it had at least 90 replies to the tweet of people saying, oh, you mean like teachers unions? And then I responded, obviously, now do the teachers unions. And it's just totally lacks self-awareness, right? For her to actually,
she would say, "Oh, well, we do want a due process. We want a fair 174-step process to remove a teacher who underperforms. We are all for accountability." That's what they would say.
Yeah, I mean, well, then you've seen Erica Sanzi's work on this, you know, and
yes. Well, actually, I wanted to just talk a little bit about this. So both the NEA and the AFT, both major teachers unions, had. So that's a different piece. So we're looking for the Erica Sanzi one. But yeah, she said, right. She's basically said that they called on Congress to legislate police reforms, which included 8 specific proposals. So this is the AFT and the NEA wrote this, you know, these 8 things that they call on police. There you go. That she called on the police unions to do. And she, you know, said, look at number 7 of their 8 proposals that they think Congress should actually write legislation to change policing. The unions, so make it clear, the unions are writing a letter to tell Congress what to do about the police. But number 7 was develop a national public database that would cover all police agencies in the U.S. and its territories, which would compile the names of officers who have had their licenses revoked due to misconduct. And Erica then writes, as signatories on this letter, the NEA and AFT are going to have to do some serious self-reflection, lest they quickly and rightly be called out as hypocrites. The 7th demand in the letter calls for a national public database. We need this exact same kind of database for teachers. And it's so glaring. She's so right that there has never been, you know, the dance of the lemons is the term used to describe teachers who just move on to another district or another state.
Passing the trash, they also call it.
Right.
Yeah, there was that 2010 Government Accountability Office report that estimated that, you know, teachers that get in trouble for sexual misconduct in the school will, on average, pass between 3 different school districts before they're actually, you know, held accountable for their actions. And I think part of it is there isn't a database for this, right? And this is, you know, Erica Sanzi has written a lot about this, and I had that other tweet pulled up on another tab. But yeah, I mean, she wrote about this whole thing in Rhode Island that went on just last year, where the 2 teachers unions in Rhode Island objected to a bill that was going to criminalize sex between school employees and students.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
So Erica's written a lot about it. Here's like a couple quotes from her. You know, she points out that Rhode Island is one of the very few states where a teacher can legally have sex with their students. And then she also pointed out that both teachers unions last year went on record in their opposition to the bill that would have criminalized all sexual relationships between teacher and student.
It's dumbfounding. It's hard to imagine their whatever theory.
So I mean, yeah, the main point here is
public relations matter. I
mean, yeah, the main point here is the teachers unions have fought to protect bad actors.
Right. And then just with this last point about teachers and police, we were kind of like the kind of combine the two and find the similarities. Yes, it's the Mike Antonucci piece in the 74. Police unions stonewall attempts at reform. So do teachers unions. Is that why they've been so silent? And he cites the New York Times description of the power of police unions, saying they're one of the most significant roadblocks to change. and about how the New York Times said that the police unions aggressively protect the rights of members accused of misconduct. Even in arbitration hearings, they have battled to keep behind closed doors. He writes that the unions spend lots of money on campaigns and litigation to block reform. They even provide lawyers for members accused of misconduct. Of course, the teachers' unions do the same thing. And finally, he adds, when liberal politicians do try to advance reform proposals, union officials have resorted to highly provocative rhetoric and hard-boiled campaign tactics to lash out at them, the Times tells us. Not only that, but as critics of the police get louder and more mainstream, the union members have elected more aggressive leaders. So he's citing these continued parallels between the police and the teachers' unions. And yet, not enough people are making this comparison, but we are right now, Corey.
Yeah, I totally agree. And actually just wrote a piece with Lindsey Burke on this. Hopefully it comes out soon in a pretty good outlet, but I'll hold my tongue beyond that. But there was actually a survey from, I'm sure you've seen this survey already. I think it was like a year or two ago, that was commissioned by NPR, and there was a nationally representative survey, and they just asked teachers in the system, do you think the teachers unions make it easier, or do you think they make it more difficult to hold bad actors
jobs,
accountable?
Stuff like that, yeah.
Or no, just to hold bad actors accountable.
Oh, I see.
And around 2/3 of both unionized teachers and non-unionized teachers agreed with the statement that unions, or teachers unions in particular, make it hard to hold, or more difficult at least, to hold bad actors accountable. Yep. So even the union members themselves, admit this.
Yeah, a lot. Look, I know, we probably most of us know, Corey, actual teachers in public schools, government schools, who are in unions, and they say they're afraid to quit because of the retribution that would come at them, of the hate, of the intimidation that would be sent their way. And it's weird, isn't it? It's weird that in America.
Yeah, I mean, one of my friends, I'll just tell you who he is, Cliff Maloney. He's the president at the Young Americans for Liberty. He shared that little meme on Facebook of the monkey looking to the side. And he said, this is great. And then someone responded saying, how could you even share this? And I responded that, well, because it was a good meme. And she responded that, well, a lot of Cliff's indirect family members are members of the union. But the thing is, criticizing the union system itself is not the same thing as criticizing union members. For one thing, you say that
they try to pretend
people are bullied into, joining the union. Rebecca Friedrichs talks about how, if you, even after the Janus decision, teachers are being bullied currently because they're being called free riders in the teachers' lounges for not paying dues if they don't like the services that are being provided by the union.
Yeah. We get tips all the times from teachers who just say, but don't use my name. They're like, here, this, here's some information, or here, this thing happened to me, but shh, like, don't tell anybody. I don't want to,
Did you see that Open Secrets data that I just shared the other day, showing the campaign contributions of the American Federation for Teachers? If you haven't, what's your guess on the political party split in the most recent year?
Oh, it's usually, I mean, if it's 95% to Democrats, that's low. It's usually I would say 98 or 99% Democrats.
All right, let's see how you did. I'm going to pull up the tweet really quickly. This tweet went pretty viral too, just the other day. Campaign contributions from the AFT. Bob Bowden was being,
I was being generous. I was
generous there.
Lowballing it.
At least 95, so you got it right. 99.2% of the contributions went to Democrats. Only 0.3% went to Republicans. Meanwhile, a survey from Education Week just last year found that 41% of teachers reported being identified as a Democrat. So 41% versus 99.2% seems extremely one-sided. And I think this is why, Rebecca, or one of the reasons why teachers, Rebecca Friedrichs and, took the case to the Supreme Court, was because they felt like they weren't being represented by
Yeah,
their
it's as if the message to, I mean, look, anyone can be a Republican or Democrat or a third party or no party. It's all fine, but it does seem like the teachers unions. I assumed after Janus they would say, "Uh-oh, now people can leave. We better actually represent, more all views, make everyone feel welcome." It's as if they doubled down to say, "If you're a Republican, please leave. We don't want you here." And yet, that hasn't happened yet, because of the fear and intimidation factor. I kind of think it will after a few years. I think it'll slowly start to change in that regard. But yes, if they keep making it clear that Republican teachers' voices don't matter in their campaign contribution decisions, I don't know how they hold on to that, forever. I kind of think the fear and intimidation factor at some point has to start to lessen.
And then just information too, right? Janus was pretty recent, right? And I don't think we have good data on trends over time. But from the data that I've seen, it doesn't seem like there's been a big reduction in power or size. So, maybe if people just start figuring, I think a lot of people just don't know that they can opt out. But to your point as well, though, it's also the intimidation. Even if you don't want to go to a work environment every day where you're being bullied and where people are looking at you funny and talking behind your back. That's a powerful incentive. Not
you need a few early leaders, and then they do it, and then it becomes okay, and then everyone's saving $1,000 a year, more or less, or something, and they spend it on something else. I wanted to cover a couple of quick stories just quickly about reopening schools after coronavirus, because there were stories. Again, this is a whole bunch of stories. Practically every state has one. I just wanted to hit a couple, and in so doing, kind of emphasize what I keep seeing, which is one size fits all state-based solutions. So these are states who say, "Hey, all districts, we have the geniuses here at, in this case, Nevada, have come up with all the, we're all epidemiologists, or so, I don't know what, but we're going to tell you everything you should do about reopening schools." This story saying schools in Nevada can open for summer school as long as students and staff remain 6 feet apart. This is the newest guidance from the Nevada Department of Education. It allows schools to open under guidelines that mandate social distancing. There's no singing allowed, no dancing allowed, no playing wind instruments, no high-risk sports allowed. They have all these rules they came up with. So that's Nevada. Now just turn to another state, Arkansas, another part of the country. State officials tell the school to prepare a blend of in-person and online education. Hey, Arkansas, we don't care if you're like a middle-sized city like Little Rock, or you're a tiny little district somewhere. We're going to tell all of you this is the one way to reopen.
And most places in Arkansas are pretty rural, right? I mean, you got Little Rock and Fayetteville. That's about it.
Yeah, right. So I mean, it's probably there are much better examples of states with extremely dissimilar districts than Arkansas. But the point being that I find it odd, and I know we've talked about this a million times, Corey, I find it odd that we have this idea that a state should have kind of one solution for, New York City and Oswego, New York is my favorite example, have about as little in common as it gets in America, as well as countless other similar examples. So anyway, that I just wanted to, they're talking about how to reopen, and I find it odd that they're not leaving it to districts.
Yeah, and this is what we talked about before, that it should be up to the locality to figure it out because of regional differences. And I think I tweeted out the other day that because this Nevada news was pretty recent, I think it was just like a day or two, a couple days ago, that the governor came out and said, look, schools can reopen immediately for summer schools. And I think I tweeted out something like Nevada schools just reopened immediately. Doesn't mean you need to send your kids back to them.
Well, I this kind of virus fear schizophrenia thing has been making me crazy for a long time about how we should be afraid of the virus when it comes to these gatherings, but then the protests on police brutality gatherings, suddenly there's no virus. Go
ahead.
Pardon?
I'm just saying, like, if we don't see any spikes in COVID-19 as a result of, the protests, that's, I don't know how people are going to respond to that. Maybe we don't see any data of increases in, risk of the virus, maybe people will be more likely to go back to school. But yeah, I think a big part of it is that people are concerned about the virus, but then also just seeing these CDC guidelines and seeing all these pictures, a lot of families are like, nah, I don't want to send my kids into that environment because it's
but address what I said. Don't you think it's kind of weird that like what the people are saying at the front of the gathering is apparently the virus is like worse if what they're saying is let's reopen Michigan, or what they're saying is they're giving a sermon at a church, or what they're saying, that kind of speech, apparently the virus is really, aggressive. But if they are giving speeches regarding police brutality, then forget about it. The best anecdote is go ahead.
This is the article that comes to my mind. NPR came out, with an article pretty much saying exactly what you're saying, that, that if you're protesting for this particular reason, then it's okay, because the thing that you are protesting is a dangerous thing. So the benefits of protesting for that outweigh the cost of getting sick from the coronavirus. But then just a few weeks ago, I think, National Review just had a story talking about this switch in rhetoric, that just a few weeks ago, people were rioting and protesting because they were, losing their livelihoods. And I think that's a pretty big risk. I'm not going to, say it's any different from, any less or more risky than the police situation. But for certain individuals, you had the suicides happening from lockdown and people losing their jobs. But it seemed like the mainstream media was, looking down on that type of protest. And so I think people should be able to protest for either type of
they should actually have the freedom to assemble, like it says in the First Amendment. So 3 quick things on this. First, the losing the livelihood. I have friends who have businesses that are going bankrupt right now, Corey. I know a woman who's a single mom with 2 daughters, and she has, I won't get too specific about her business, but she is on the cusp of losing the business she's had for years, and it's how she provides for her children. And so she is watching as she is banned from operating while giant crowds form, as long as it's for another reason.
Strange, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah, businesses can't reopen, but we can have huge crowds of people.
Secondly,
so why can't the businesses? I mean, in DC, for example, the businesses just opened like restaurants for outdoors eating. But, most businesses don't have the outdoors eating.
Yes. And most businesses aren't outdoors. They don't have an outdoor option. Most businesses.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. So like Cassidy and I went to the outdoor option just the other day, and it was great. They had everybody spaced out. And I would imagine if they allowed people to, businesses open inside as well, they would do the spacing out thing as well, right? Because they think that's
it reduces your profits. But if you can only serve half the number of customers you would before, a lot of restaurants operated with thin margins to begin with, and now you cut your revenue that much. But I was going to say, 2 other things. One, we're talking about the shift, how we're supposed to be afraid of the virus, then we suddenly forget about being afraid of the virus. Well, there's messaging. It's going to shift yet again. There was an NPR tweet about how the Republican National Convention is going to be dangerous to participants, and they were risking the health of the communities and the lives of the people. And so that was kind of ironic, right? And then the third point I want to bring up is Governor Murphy, my governor in my state of New Jersey, violated his own executive order. Like he had a stay-at-home executive order. He ordered people like me to all stay home, except then he went to a protest during his own executive order. And a couple of the state legislators have said now that he should be cited, like he should be given a ticket for violating the law, which was his order. And he, of course, and then the best part of the story is at the end, the next day, once all this came up of his hypocrisy for ordering everyone to stay home while he's actually not staying home, he then said, okay, well, we're going to forget that executive order. That one we'll just forget about. The next day, he basically erased it because, you can pick and choose, essentially. I guess if you're governor, you can make rules for some people and then violate them if you want to. And then the next day, just kind of retroactively make your own act legal after all by rescinding your
There's 2 separate sets of rules, aren't there, Bob? Some animals are more equal than others.
That's kind of the thing. All right, so let's see.
What was it? Bill de Blasio, he like got caught going to the gym or something when this all first started in March.
Yes,
that there was a big public backlash to that as well.
Yes, and the Chicago Mayor Lightfoot got her roots done, but after everyone else was banned from going to the salon. But it's okay for the Chicago mayor.
With all the problems of social media and all the negative results that come from that, I think there's a lot of benefits that can come from social media as well. And one is the public backlash to governors and stuff going.
It's a segue.
Yeah, and there's a segue. I'm not ruining it. But yeah, to the governors, but then also ridiculous things that were happening in Buffalo, New York. Here's the original story. If you don't remember from last week when we talked about this, one of Buffalo's highest performing charter schools was voted to close by the Board of Regents in New York. And this charter school had one of the highest graduation rates. I think it was about like a 94% graduation rate. It was ranked, in the top 10 in the area in both math and reading. And it also served I think a 90% proportion of students who qualified for the federal lunch program, meaning that they're from low-income families. So they're knocking it out of the park, and they voted 9-7 to close this high-performing charter school. And when we talked about this last week, but they interviewed one of the Board of Regents, and they pretty much just would not answer the question. But we all know it was to protect the monopoly government school system. But we got another update from this, I think, a day or two ago. Here's those stats. 94% graduation rate, number 4 in math, number 6 in science. 90% of the students were from low-income families, and they just voted to reverse that decision. My original tweet on this, I think, went pretty viral. I think it had over 200,000 impressions because everybody rightly, saw this and was like, if you're going to close a charter school, why are you going to choose one of the higher performing ones? This makes absolutely no sense unless you're just trying to protect the monopoly. And it was evident with that interview.
They were dumb enough to do that to one of the best. In other words, so often they pick schools that actually are doing better than the district, but maybe not as great as this Buffalo charter school, Buffalo Science. It's happened. I have personal anecdotes of people I've known who have run charter schools, people I've interviewed. The charter schools are closed down and that charter school is doing better than other schools in the district. But it still may not be doing, say, at the state average. It may just be a very weak district, and this charter school is outperforming the district, but not the state average. They'll close it down. But they were dumb enough to actually close down a fantastic charter school. So this is a rare example where justice prevailed.
Yeah, and look, it didn't take a lot of time for social media to get on this. A lot of people pushed back, and if you even look at the article on this, I think they say something about the proponents of charter schools. Is this even the right article? So the article goes into how they actually reversed the decision with the unanimous vote. The original vote was 9-7 to close it. The new vote was 16-0 to allow the school to continue.
And with no new information. It wasn't like some new. Yeah. Oh, now we just learned about their reading scores. We didn't have that before. Okay, now we're going to leave it open. No, it was just they just got the heat and they just said, "Oh, okay."
I'm thinking of a different article than this one, but in another article they even said that there was a lot of pushback by the public, and that's why I think that's why I wanted to bring this up with the segue that social media with all the crap that goes along with it and all the frustration that goes along with it. In some rare instances, it can be used for holding government actors accountable, and it can be used for the power of good. I think I tweeted something along, one of those lines that, look, public backlash against big government can be a powerful tool for good. They reversed the decision 16-0. There's the new story on it, and this is one of those good things that's happened in the past week.
Yeah, I like they interview the people like one of the regents who had voted no in May attempted to explain why they were changing their votes. It was really just a protest vote, Regent Nan Mead said. Quote, "I've reconsidered after great internal struggle and very strongly believe this school is exemplary, given what it's done for student achievement and well-being," Regent Francis Willis
knew
said.
how it was doing before they voted.
Oh, yeah, no, exactly, yeah.
Come on.
The great internal struggle was how much social media backlash they had. That was the internal struggle.
Mean, there was backlash, before the vote even happened. It just wasn't as crazy as the backlash that happened after. They wanted to. But look, there was a Choice Media story of the day on this as well by Eric Wern, Kennesaw State University. I believe he's a clinical professor, education policy professor. We should check out his Choice Media story of the day on this very subject.
I'd say a 94% graduation rate is pretty good. Hi, I'm Eric Wern with the Education Economics Center at Kennesaw State. The story of the day I've chosen for June 9th is Regents reverse closure of high-performing Buffalo Academy of Science charter school. This school had its charter renewal voted down in May. Some of the board members who voted it down then said that they did so not because the school was bad, but because of the financial impact it was having on its competitors. One of the board members said the vote at the time was really just a protest vote against charter schools. It's great that this will work out for these families in Buffalo, but moves like this are one reason why more and more families are choosing to look at school models that are completely outside of the legislative and policy system, like homeschooling and hybrid homeschools, where they can avoid people logging protest votes against their kids' needs. You can find this story and others like it at choicemedia.tv.
I met Eric when we first were covering the Atlanta cheating scandal. I was like 7 years ago or something like that, and we interviewed him about that, and he's been great ever since. So let me quickly move on, because, we have to get to the title of this show, which is What About Inflation? I want to quickly move through this one, which is just unions crying we need more money. So this is a couple of U.S. news stories. We saw a new estimate to reopen schools after coronavirus, $116 billion. That's the projection. Pocket change. That's the AFT projection that of what America's schools will need. An average of 1.2 million each to reopen from coronavirus-related closures. This is a 5-alarm fire, said Randy Weingarten, president of the AFT, the 1.7 million member teachers union said. So, boy, we need a lot of money. And then there's another U.S. news story, which is same idea, and there's no way to reopen schools safely without a federal bailout. This from school superintendents. Oh, yeah, we need that money, right? So this, and then why? Because of the CDC's safety recommendations for reopening. They are saying school districts will forced to spend nearly $2 million per district. I guess this is for they get into it. They actually say for hand sanitizer, disinfectant wipes. They say $490 per student for all this stuff, gloves and masks and other personal protective equipment. Oh, we can need all this stuff for all these gloves. And so then it was beautifully described, I thought, in a piece by Rick Hess and Matthew Rice in the National Review called "The Schools That Cried Wolf." And they write in that the reason it's hard to take these demands for money seriously is they just go through even the very recent history where they're saying all the same stuff. In last year, 2019, the AFT launched their Fund Our Future campaign, okay? They said that promising to take on years of disinvestment that have hurt our students and faculty and led to overcrowded classrooms and unhealthy, unsafe environments. They say, so this is the AFT's, campaign. Then in New York City in May, the school chancellor, Richard Carranza, decried the state of New York City's education budget, telling council members, "We're cutting to the bone. There is no fat to cut, no meat to cut." He failed to mention that New York City is one of the highest spending school systems in the country. So Messrs. Hess and Rice go through all the examples where all these unions, spokespeople, as well as kind of establishmentarians and superintendents are all saying, it's every year. They're just saying we're desperately underfunded. It's a crisis. We need more money immediately. So when they come and say, now we need all this new money to get the hand sanitizer and the masks and stuff, he kind of says, okay, this is crying wolf.
Yeah, of course. They never want to cut anything. They always just want more and more money. I mean, you can theoretically think about how they could actually save money from coronavirus, because a lot of districts, for example, are allowing families to continue virtual education. Of course, in the short run, you may have to invest in like tablets or something, or maybe help students with internet access during, the virtual education that continues. But you won't need as much, stuff in the brick and mortar schools. And technology should lead to cost savings in the long run. So in theory, schools should be able to cut and adjust. But of course, they don't want to make any of those cuts, and they don't want to have to spend the money efficiently. Instead, they're just going to call for more and more money and not have to think about adjusting. And that's what happens when you have a monopoly.
Okay, so Corey, I ask you the question: what about inflation? That's the title of this show. What does that title even mean?
I don't know. It might have a lot to do with a lot of the back and forth that have been going on since this past weekend, where a lot of tweets have gone pretty viral. And I'll bring up one in particular, and it has to do with the policing issue and defunding police that we started this episode all about. But here's just one of them that was the most egregious and one of the most viral ones as well. In just a day or two, it got over 500,000 likes. And just most recently today, when I saw the tweet, it has 663,000 likes. And here's the tweet.
Wow.
Defunding the police sounds radical until you realize we've been defunding education for years.
Well, wait, they're for the first one and against the second one, right? I'm just
yeah. They're saying, yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
But the point is, people saw this and they're like, "Oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense."
We've been defunding education.
Oh yeah, we've been defunding education for years. So I responded.
You had a little something to say about that, didn't you, Professor DeAngelis?
Yes, and my response, I've gotten blocked by this guy, and so the reason why I had to bring up the screenshot that I just brought up was because he blocked me, because I pointed out that, look, here, I'll bring up the window really quickly, that, if you scroll up, I reported the tweet for being incorrect too, but he blocked me, so I can't even see it. I said, that's a lie. Real education spending per pupil has increased by 280% in real terms.
Oh, real. Yeah, real. Look at that word real. Okay.
And so I presented the figures in 2018, 2019 dollars. In 1960, we spent about $4,000 per pupil. And today, in the most recent school year, National Center for Education Statistics shows that we've spent $15,424 per pupil in the 2016-17 school year. I did some snark. That's how Twitter works. Yeah. And at the time when I tweeted this, it had half as many likes. It's doubled since then. Where are my $304,000 likes? 304 likes for pointing out.
Okay, so you point out that that it's been almost a quadrupling. Okay, go ahead.
And this is true in the United States. This is true in the long-term trend, essentially, with any state that you look at. In this guy's, you're blocked, but he's a football coach in California. I don't know who he is. He could be a good guy. He probably just doesn't know that this trend has happened this way. And he's a football coach in California at a high school. And even if you look in California, if you look in the National Center for Education Statistics data, real means inflation adjusted.
Okay, no, we understand. I think we got it.
Has increased by about 197% in California, if I remember correctly.
All right.
Just because I don't remember correctly, I'm just going to say I know it's over 100% since 1970, according to the federal data on this. And so a lot of people just started responding to me, no, you're wrong. You didn't adjust for inflation. Oh, you think you're so smart. You now start adjusting for inflation. Yeah. So here's a couple of the tweets where people were saying,
you don't understand there's this inflation thing, Corey. We're smart and you're stupid. You don't know there's inflation happening. We are aware of that, and that's how you make it seem like the number is higher, but that's only because of inflation.
And I don't care if you don't know that real, doesn't mean inflation. Real. I don't care if you
means
don't know
inflation adjusted.
Inflation adjusted, but don't come swinging at me like a smart ass and trying to come at me with so much confidence about how I didn't adjust for inflation. It's funny though, that there's that kind of reaction tells you that everybody thinks it's unbelievable that we've increased real education spending by 280% since 1960. They don't even check it. They just think, when they look at it, they're like, I can't
defunding. Forget about increasing. It's defunded, according to that tweet.
A lot of people were saying, well, if you adjust it for inflation, it actually decreased by 50%. And what they were doing was they were taking my inflation adjusted numbers and doing something I like to call double inflation adjusting, which would make it look like we decreased real spending, to which I replied, hey, there's someone in the background.
Yeah, I saw that. I was
Someone
there
just
was
got
a,
off of work.
I was going to talk about the ghost in the apartment a second ago. But go ahead,
But
keep
here's some
going.
of the tweets. Here's one of them. I quote tweeted them. This is how Twitter works. Inflation, you idiot.
Oh,
They responded to my other tweet. Inflation, you idiot. And to which I respond, real
Yes.
means inflation adjusted. Here's another
Yes.
one. They didn't just, they were so confident that I hadn't adjusted for inflation. And I will tell you, I linked to all the tables in this. People look, they didn't bother to look. And when they did, they didn't look at the inflation adjusted column or look at the numbers to see that they were actually correct. But some people thought they were so smart. A lot of people actually brought up that, well, look, if you have 1960, you have $4,060 in 1960. Well, that's $33,000. We should be spending $33,000 per pupil, not $15,000 per pupil. Not knowing again that the $4,060 was already in 2018, $19, already in today's dollars. So they double adjusted for inflation.
Got it.
Some people deleted the tweets. Some people doubled and tripled down. Here's another one. Just another person. This tweet got thousands and thousands of likes. Bro, we haven't defunded education. It's increased. And then let's see if there's any more responses. And then when people finally, okay, so here's another one. This guy says he's an economics, people were saying, oh, I took economics. You should take economics, Corey. You don't know anything about inflation. This guy, has economics in his bio. My tweet even said inflation adjusted. And he's over here like, I'd stop using stats if I were you, because, the home prices have increased since 1960, trying to say, look, you haven't adjusted for inflation. So a lot of people jumped on him for that. Here's just a couple of more. This tweet right here, I said inflation adjusted. This person's gut reaction, knee-jerk reaction was, are your numbers including the rate of inflation? Bro, you can't make this stuff up. It says, even when I stopped using real and started just saying flat out inflation adjusted, they still didn't get it. And other people were saying, oh, well, that's from the Department of Education. Betsy DeVos is in charge of the Department of Education. So those numbers can't be real.
Oh, yeah.
So we had flat earthers coming out like that.
Right.
I call it the Dunning-Kruger effect. Is how we can explain all this. This guy wanted to tell me you need to actually understand economics, or at least basic math, to try to make this point. He brings up inflation again incorrectly.
Yeah.
The worst part about this is he got over 1,000 likes for again being wrong. He already adjusted for inflation.
Yeah.
So I mean, everybody was kind of just having a field day with this on social media.
I mean, you could adjust inflation 3 times and 4 times and 5 times if you want to make a bigger, bigger and bigger error, I guess, right? It's kind of like
this guy from the UK.
Is it like vacuuming the living room? Like if you do it over and over, it just gets better and better. Like adjusting for inflation, you just do it again.
So you're right? I mean, and someone even made this meme about it.
Yeah.
I guess this came from one of my recent videos at Cato. Say what about inflation one more time? I dare you, just because I've been replying to so many of these people, just like I've already adjusted for inflation.
Yeah.
But again, it
doesn't matter. Come on. In this era, it doesn't. People aren't interested in high-minded discussion of accurate numbers. Of course not. This is a era of shame, social media, and anger driving clicks.
Over 500,000 likes based on a lie.
Right.
And the last part is when people would pivot after if they ever did acknowledge that, okay, yeah, you did adjust for inflation, they'll pivot and they'll say something like, laugh out loud, teachers have to buy their own supplies. And so they'll essentially tacitly admit that, the government school system wastes a ton of money, which that's a different point. But look,
absolutely, it's nothing
I'm
to
not
do with
arguing
it.
with that. It's like, yeah, you're right. We have wasted a lot of money. But what I'm saying is, for you to say we defunded education, you're implying we should pour more money into that bottomless pit. And what makes you believe that they're going to not waste it in the future? You telling me that the money is wasted and that teachers already have to buy their own supplies and that teachers' salaries are stagnant over time, that tells you that pouring more money into the future, if history, tells us anything, that it's going to be wasted too.
You could double education spending tomorrow everywhere. You could just do it tomorrow. You could double education spending money everywhere tomorrow. You could have all those administrators hire the superintendents hire a bunch of new administration people to crunch paperwork or do nothing, more or less, do useless things, sit around in offices, etc. A bunch of new administration still have teachers buying their own chalk and buying their own erasers and no money for computers. And you'd still have those people sending those same tweets saying, there's not enough money for chalk. And you could say, well, okay, that doesn't mean there's not enough spent.
I used his tweet, his original tweet, and reworded it a little bit. If you want to see it really quickly,
go ahead.
But he says, it's radical. Once you realize we've been defunding education, I said,
I love that.
We've been defunding government schools sounds radical too, and until you realize we've been defunding families for years. And I'm not saying don't fund education at all. As you can see in my next follow-up tweet, we already spend a ton of money per child per year. There's no reason.
The one thing you left out of that, Corey, always put in the per classroom. You should say so for 25 kids.
$200,000
you know what I mean?
Per classroom. Much more than that. But for 13 kids, it would be $200,000. So it's much more than
$300,000 for 20 kids,
depending on the class size. But I'm not saying that we should defund education altogether. But if we're going to fund it, if we're going to put money into the system, it should be attached to families, just like we do with food stamps and Pell Grants. The money should follow the child. It shouldn't go to a school, regardless of the quality of that school and regardless of the decision and the satisfaction levels of the families and the students that are attending those schools.
In our waning moments, Corey, talk about this school surveillance stuff, because that was a really cool story. And the idea is, because of COVID-19, we pretty much how to put chips in children. I think that's the conclusion, right?
It's like it came straight out of 1984, isn't it? The school district, I think it's a small school district in Ohio, but they have a plan to—
New Albany, Ohio, yes.
Yeah, they turned to surveillance tech to prevent COVID-19 spread. And their theory for this is, when students return, we'll put essentially these chips on them. Not that the chips aren't going into their skin or anything. I haven't read too much.
That would be the next year. Yeah, that would be the following year.
But the idea is to see where students are congregating during the day and to see how we can kind of prevent that congregation and encourage social distancing using these computer chips or whatever they are. But look, it's like it comes out of 1984, right? If you look into this article, it says that this school district, which serves about 5,000 students, plans to test a system that would require each student to wear an electronic beacon. Require each student. It's not
require each student to wear an electronic beacon to track their location to within a few feet.
That's creepy, man. I don't want. Come on.
Wow.
Like, you're already making my kids go to school, right? And you're already making me, if I'm a student, go to school from the student's point of view. Now you're going to track my every move. That seems like it's an infringements on individual liberties. And
I guess
surveillance state, right? Or surveillance.
I guess it's only when they're in the school building, though. Is that it? Can't they catch the coronavirus after school too? Why would they? If you're gonna, if your point is to have this, surveillance tech to track the kids for, viral, communicable, exposure, you would think that you wouldn't want to do it only during the school day because they could catch the virus. But does that mean they're literally tracking them on the weekends?
If this was I don't know, but if this was voluntary, I wouldn't have much of a problem with it. It's the require one that really, maybe they'll change that before they actually implement it. But the language today says they plan to require each student. So that's the big issue I have with this. If people are voluntarily saying, I want to learn about,
it sounds like we've made it up. It sounds like this is some sort of thing that we're like scare tacticking, like, in the future this could happen. This is actually. It's like it's a Babylon Bee article, but it's not.
Is
it actually happening? Or are they thinking of doing it? Have they already decided to do it?
Well, it says they plan to implement. So it's not. I don't know if it's official, but there are discussions about it.
It says plans to test the system. Yeah.
That's the current plan. They
That's
didn't
the
say
plan.
they're voting on it. They didn't say, people have. It's not like
You know what? We're gonna have to call up. We're gonna have to call this this school district and find out if it's on the weekends too. And
oh, that would be totally horrible, especially if it's requiring. Like yeah, you can see one public interest maybe thing for
it's weird enough that schools now track kids' social media posts when they're not at school and punish them for social media posts when they're not at school. And that's a controversial subject. I know. I know there are kids that really do say really terrible, terrible things on social media. But my point of view is, if it's a private school and you kind of have that policy, but someone could walk away if they don't want it, to me that would be okay. But when you actually have the government schools monitoring 24 hours a day what kids are saying on their own social media accounts, I don't know. It's very tricky to say we're going to punish you for that.
I think it depends what they're saying too.
Yeah, but it's actionable. If it was an illegal thing, like the First Amendment standard is clear and present danger. It's a threat. It's fire in a crowded theater. It's I'm going to come beat you up on Monday. If it's a threat, then that's just violation of the law. You don't need a school policy against that. It's when, I guess there are. I mean, put it this way: we're getting another topic, and I'll just wrap it up by saying this: if it were some sort of bullying thing that seemed really bad, and if I were running a public school, I would probably want to talk with the kid about it, maybe talk with the parents about it too. But punishing the kids for their speech that's not threatening, I don't know about that. So anyway,
it doesn't really make much sense. But maybe we'll have some new stories of that when schools reopen.
Yeah. All right, everybody. We've done it. We did it again, Corey.
Yet again. Yeah.
Thanks
for. It's always good to talk to you during our show, Bob.
We're
off air too.
we're thank you. We're rocking and rolling on the random assignment, and plus I appreciate the response we're getting from people. We're getting some good response on the show. So it's an audio podcast too, in case you guys didn't know that. And so I guess thanks for viewing. Thanks for watching.
Yep. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Until next week. This was the Random Assignment Podcast, and I know we didn't bring up any comments at the bottom of the screen today. I want to apologize for that, but we are reading them as they come up. I see them, and I'll try to get to the comments after the show and try to respond to some of those as well. In the future, we'll try to feature more of them in the show as well, especially when we don't have as much pressing
and
things.
For the super fans of Random Assignment, you can scroll back and look at about the 48-minute point for the secret person lurking in Corey's condo. So that's a home game that you could play.
There's a dog sitting by my feet too. I should show that, but maybe not. He's puffing and puffing. I don't know if you can hear that.
Oh, come on, bring him that. Now you're gonna say that. You gotta bring him.
Radar. He can't. The problem is he can't hear me, and he's like literally right below. Here, let me try to get the.
He can't hear you. Is he deaf?
Can you see him?
Oh, there we are. That's Radar.
Yeah, he's like sitting there puffing right below the.
Okay.
He's like right by my feet, like breathing on my feet. And sometimes, I don't know if people have heard on the show, a couple weeks ago, but I think he was like squeaking his toys like crazy. I tried to take his toys away from him right before the show because before I started taking away the toys, it was like I'd start doing my podcast or doing our show. That's the time that he wanted to start playing with toys. And it was like begging for attention essentially. And it just, the new mic picks all those little details up. So,
wow.
So now he just sits right by my feet to try to get my attention.
I see. All right. Thanks everybody. We'll see you next week.
All right. Have a good one, everybody.